Hello everyone, welcome to the Math Club Talk. Today's speaker is Muthukumar Perumal. He's an NVHM fellow, NVHM postdoctoral fellow at ISI Bangalore. He will be speaking on the invariant subspace problem. And if anyone has any doubts in between, so you can just unmute yourself and ask. Over to you, Dr. Muthukumar.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Uh, yeah. Very good morning to all of you. So today I will be talking about invariant success problem. Maybe there's the history of this. There's some history given by Yadav. Maybe in these 5 pages I'll send you by mail so that you can have a look. So this is a history about the problem. Okay. Anyway, so now I'll just move to the subject. uh, Invariant subspace problem. So let's start with the vector space. So assume that it's a vector space over is over real number or complex number. Okay. So this is not a question. I'm just saying that over real number or complex number. Okay. So now take a, it's a linear map. I hope all of you know what do you mean by vector space and linear map. So I assume that. Uh, so this the every linear map is sends 0 to 0, and of course we are taking the map from V to V. So the T of V is against a subset of V. In fact, not only subset, this will be a subspace. So this is called the range. So the range will be always subspace, and so and the T of 0 is the every linear maps it always maps to 0. Okay, so that's a uh, two known thing. Okay, a subspace is called invariant subspace for the given map or for a given operator if it maps W into W. That means like, so if you just take a subspace, the image of that if it's the same space, then we'll call them to be subspace. So that means for a take a W as a subspace of V, and then under the given map T, just try to find the image of W. If it just sits inside again to W, so they will say that W is an invariant subspace of the given map. Okay. But these two properties says that if you take a singleton 0, then that's also always a subspace. Whole V is also a subspace of V. So these two are always a invariant subspace of T. So that means like we always, for given any linear map, we always have at least these two are we have at least these two are invariant subspaces. Good. So the next natural question is, so is there any other non-trivial invariant subspace? Okay. So for this, we have to assume the dimension of the vector space should be more than one. So we can't suppose if you have a dimension is one, then we can't have any proper subspace because the W is a subspace. So dimension, so you're expecting to be other than 0 and V. So that means you should have like in between like one more if you have like a W is a proper subspace of V means, so that means the dimension should be at least less than 1. So which says that the dimension of V should be at least 2, so that we can have some proper subspace. Okay. So again, I hope all of you know that what is the definition of eigenvalue and eigenvector. Eigenvalue and eigenvector, I'll just recall that. So a vector, a element in a V is said to be eigenvector if it should be a non-zero vector, and then there's some complex number lambda such that T of x equal lambda x. Okay. So then we'll call them to be lambda to be eigenvalue and x to be eigenvector. Okay. So note that this x should be a non-zero vector, because if you take x allowed to be 0, then the T of 0 is 0, then I can write whatever the lambda for every lambda it works. So that's why we're starting with the vector should be non-zero vector. And note that this is like some interesting fact that if x is an eigenvector, that means if the Tx is lambda x, if you take a then span of x, it's also an invariant subspace under T. Because if you take a span of x means the any element is of the form is a constant multiple of x. If you apply under T, then again by this like because x maps to lambda times x, some constant times c times x is also maps to some c lambda times x. So again that will be constant of time of x, some multiple of x. So that means the span of x is an always invariant subspace of T. So and just note that whenever if that means if you have T as a eigenvalue lambda, then we have we have a one-dimensional subspace, namely the span of X. So that will be a one-dimensional inner subspace of the given operator T. So this is just easy to check. Maybe I just leave as a simple exercise to you. Just you can verify that T has an eigenvalue if and only if T has a one-dimensional invariant subspace. Yes. So now next question is, suppose if every operator has an eigenvalue, then we are done. At least then we have one-dimensional inner subspace. So then it gives the answer for our question. So we have some proper invariant subspace. So the next question, whether every linear map has an eigenvalue. So indeed, answer is no. As all of you learn your basic course in linear algebra. But I'll just recall once again. You take a x1, x2 in R2, which maps to x2 minus x1. Okay. Suppose T has an eigenvalue. So I want to prove that this map T does not have any eigenvalue. Suppose assume that T has an eigenvalue. So by its definition, Tx equal lambda x, where x is a non-zero vector. Okay. So Tx, I'm just writing the definition, and lambda times x. Okay. So now comparing the both things. So lambda x1 equal to x2 and lambda times x2 equal to minus x1. Okay. Suppose if lambda is 0, if lambda is 0 means this is 0, that means x2 is 0. This is 0, that means x1 is 0. So hence x1, x2 both are 0, that means x becomes 0 vector. So but that's not possible because we should have, this should be eigenvalue. So that means like x should be a non-zero vector. So both elements are 0. This is not possible. So now we are starting the next case. Suppose lambda is non-zero value, non-zero number. You assume that suppose if anyone, suppose x1 is 0, if x1 is 0, that means lambda times x2 is 0, but lambda is non-zero, that means x2 is 0. And similarly, like if you assume x2 is 0, that leaves x1 to be 0. That means if you assume any one of them is 0, that leaves both of them to be 0. So we want a non-zero vector. So assume that so both of them is non-zero. That means x1, x2 both are non-zero. But again, still this case, now you can x2 that will be equal to lambda times x1, and this will equal to lambda times x2. Now divide both. If you just divide both of the equations, the lambda will get cancelled because lambda is a non-zero number, and these two are non-zero numbers, so I can divide them. If you just cancel both sides, then x2 squared will be equal to minus x1 the whole square. You see, so this is a square number, this is a positive number, like a bigger than or equal 0, and this is a square number with a negative sign. So this is a less than or equal 0. So both are same. So that means it's only possibilities. Some non-negative number and non-positive number will be same, means that means 0 is the only possibility. So that means which again leads that x is 0. So this is not possible. So that means so it has no 0 eigenvalue, and also non-zero number cannot be eigenvalue. Hence, so this operator has no eigenvalue. So that means, but the dimension is R2. Whole R2 is an invariant subspace. Singleton 0 is an invariant subspace. So, but there is no eigenvalue. That means there is no one-dimensional subspace in invariant subspace. So that means this T has no proper non-trivial invariant subspace. Okay. So maybe I think you are like familiar with, like, for a given this operator, you may just write as a matrix form. Once you write the matrix form for finding eigenvalues, just you may solving the characteristic polynomial. And if you just solve this characteristic polynomial, it just leads me like a lambda square plus 1, and this gives two values, lambda plus or minus I. But now we are in a vector space over R, so that's why these things like is not acceptable as eigenvalues. So that's why we get a T has no eigenvalues. But if you take the same operator in a complex plane, that means in a complex order pair C2, that if a T maps from C2 to C2 with take a same map, then you have like again the same as a operator, and then you have matrix form, and then you have these two eigenvalues. So hence, so this has a this map. If you take C2 to C2, it has eigenvalues plus or minus I. So hence, so now you have one-dimensional linear subspace for this operator T. Okay. So in general, if you take any map, any linear map from Cn to Cn, So that's a corresponding to you have a matrix form. So once you have a matrix form for finding eigenvalues, you just take a, like a determinant of a minus lambda I is 0. That means this is called like characteristic polynomial. So the characteristic polynomial will be now nth degree polynomial in complex entries of degree n. So now it has a n complex roots. They may be dejoined or they may not dejoin, but you have n complex roots. So this is assumed by fundamental theorem of algebra. So that means every linear map from Cn to Cn, it has an eigenvalue. That means it has an one-dimensional invariant space. Okay. So as far as in the complex case, so we are done. So like if you have a vector space over complex plane, then we have a eigenvalue. Then so it it gives us the one-dimensional invariant space. In particular, we have a proper invariant space. Okay. So now, but note that this dimension is finite. In it, instead of Cn, if we take any vector space over C with the dimension finite, and now take any linear map on V, then T has eigenvalues. So in particular, T has a non-trivial invariant space. Because like the just is nothing to prove here. Just if the dimension is equal to some number n, then the V is isomorphic to Cn as a vector space. So hence we in Cn we know the how to do the things by fundamental theorem of algebra. We have eigenvalue. So hence which just gives that any finite dimensional vector space. So we have a this proper non-trivial invariant space. Okay. So now the question now next goes to if the dimension is infinite, then will it be true again? So that's the question. Does every linear map on a complex vector space has an eigenvalue or not? Okay. The answer is no. Of course, whenever you are in a finite dimensional, answer is yes. If you are in an infinite dimensional space, answer it may not have always. So now consider this the sequence space L2. So I'll just define what is that. It's a set of all complex sequences with a square summable sequences. Like that means the summation of mod x n square will be finite. So take a set of all square summable sequences. Yeah. In this collection, now take a En to be 0 0 0 1 at 1 at nth position. So now E1 will be at 1 0 0. E2 is a 0 1, like it goes like this. These all ENs are linearly independent set, as you did for the if you take Rn or Cn, the dimension is n. So you say that like this E1, E2, En are linearly independent set. So just the same things it work here. So this is a linearly independent set, but now you say n varies from 1 to infinity. That means you have a infinite linear independent set. So that means the dimension of this space to be infinite. So this is an infinite dimensional vector space. And need is there's some nice subspace of this L2. It called C naught naught. Take a span of this E1, E2, E3, all those elements. If you take its span, it's called C naught naught. Namely, we'll call them to be eventually zero sequences. That means like if there's an element in x1, x2, x like if there's a sequence in the C naught naught, that means there's a stage n. After that, the xn is 0 for all n. So that means like eventually the sequence will be after some stage is 0. So that's just trivial because now you're taking the span of E1, E2 like this. The span means you have a finite linear combination, but En means like a nth term 1 and elsewhere is 0. So if you have like if you take like some constant multiple of it and adding some finitely many terms of it, then obviously after some stage your all xn to be 0. So that is a part of that's a definition of C naught naught. Okay. So now I'll define what is shift operator. Define L2 to L2. The shift operator, or namely it's called right shift because we are just shifting from the right side. X1, X2, X3, just send them to 0, X1, X2, like it goes like that. Okay. So now you can just check that this is trivially a linear map, because it's nothing to verify for the linearity here. So map is linear. So now the question whether this is a linear map in an infinite dimensional complex vector space. So is it have eigenvalue? So once if it has eigenvalue, then I have a one dimensional invariant subspace. So that's what we are trying now. Suppose lambda x equal to tx. So what is tx? The image of x. So it will be 0, x1, x2 like this. So lambda times x, so lambda x1, lambda x2, lambda x3. So by comparing this, lambda x1 to be 0 and lambda x2 it will be x1 and like that. Okay, the product of two times lambda times x1 is 0, which means so I'm just now taking as a two cases. So lambda is 0 and lambda non-zero case. If it's lambda equal 0, note that if lambda equal 0, then this term is 0 because lambda times x2 is 0. That means x1 is 0. Lambda is 0, that means lambda x3 is 0, that means x2 is 0. So which like, so if lambda is 0, the whole term becomes 0. That means your x1, x2 all are 0. That means you have only 0 vector. So that means 0 cannot be an eigenvalue for this operator T. Now take a non-zero value. Lambda is non-zero, but lambda x1 is 0. So that means lambda non-zero and x1 has to be 0. Okay. So x1 is 0 means that means the second term is 0 now. Lambda x2 is 0, but lambda non-zero, that forces that x2 is 0. Hence now third term is 0. So which keep on inducer, x3 is 0 and it goes like that. So hence you have again x is 0. So whether you have lambda 0 or non-zero, you have only 0 is a vector satisfying this property. So hence T has no eigenvalue. So that means the right shift operator does not have any eigenvalue. So this does not have any eigenvalue means, so this does not have any one-dimensional subspace, one-dimensional invariant subspace. Okay. So now the next question, like suppose it does not have a one-dimensional invariant subspace, but now you should have some proper subspace other than 0 or L2, like other than the trivial spaces. Is any non-trivial invariant subspace for this case? So that's the question. Of course, when you are in an infinite dimensional space, you take a arbitrary element, non-zero element. Now take x, t of x, and t of x. That's called t squared of x. Now t cube of x. So that means t of t squared of x. So and take like this. So this is called orbit. And now you take their span. If you take a span of these vectors, so this will be, but this may not be a linearly independent, but you're just taking the span. Okay. Once you take a span, so there will be a vector space. That's again subspace of your given space. Okay, but now note that this will be clearly invariant subspace, because if you take any element here, if you apply T, then the image is also part of here. So that means if you take any finite linear combination and if you apply T on that element, again the image will be subset of this space again. So it's trivial to check that W is again an invariant subspace of this shift operator. So for our case, if you just take your x to be start with the e1 vector, that means 1 0 0 0. Then if you take a one right shift, then the e1 maps to e2. That means, and then if you apply t of e2, then that gives e3. So like that means it gives e1 e2 e3, and that gives our the span of that will be the c naught naught. Okay, so that means c naught naught is a non-trivial, the proper invariant subspace of right shift operator. Okay, so I'll now just recall some basic facts from analysis before I move further. So what is called separable metric space? So metric space, I assume that all of you know what is metric space. So a non-empty set with its metric, it's called metric space. The metric space is called separable if it has a countable dense. That means there's a countable set such that its closure is whole space X. Say for example, if you take rational numbers, they are countable and its closure is real number. But R is a metric space under usual metric, like namely distance between x comma y is given by modulus of x minus y. So R is an as an example of a separable metric space. So similarly, if we take R2, R3, or in general Rn, so the Qn will be a countable set, is a dense set of Rn. And similarly, for complex plane, you take the both as a rational coefficient, like the imaginary part and real part as a rational numbers. So this will gives a dense set, is a countable dense set for Cn. So hence Cn and Rn they are always as an example of separable metric spaces. And note that if if a if a subspace A is a separable, then its closure is also a separable space. Yeah. So now we'll come to what's called non-linear space. Okay. So norm is a function defined on a vector space. So for a given vector space over a complex plane or a real line, so we are defining a map from V to R. In fact, like not to R, like in fact for positive all non-negative real numbers, for positive numbers, we are just defining a map. The property of the map just says the norm x is always positive. That means like instead of R, the range will be always so only is a bigger than or equal 0. And this is 0 if and only if the case for x equal 0. That means for all non-zero elements, it will be strictly positive. And then you have now vector space. So vector space means you have two operations. One is vector addition and scalar multiplication. So whenever you have already some operation and you are defining some like a new new operation in it or new function in it, so then you should compare like you should know like what is the relation between the earlier operations and the new operations. So this new function with the alpha x is behaves like this, mod alpha times norm x. And for the vector addition, it behaves like as a triangle inequality. Okay. So this defines if you just take a d of xy, it's a mod of x minus y. So this just gives a metric. So that means like in a vector space structure, you're defining a metric structure using the help of norm. So hence the non-linear space now it has a two good structures, vector space structures and metric space structures. In the case of metric space, if you take a set or subset, then you are expecting to be your subset to be open set or closed sets. So these are the main important sets of your metric space. And then if you consider any map from a metric space to metric space, at least you require to them be a continuous map. So these are the very basic expectation from in the case of metric space. But if you're working in a vector space structure, so you don't look for any subset, you always look for a subspaces. That means you want again this the subset is also to be a metric space. And also you don't look for any under maps, you always look for a linear maps. So hence so now now in the non-linear case, so now you have two good structures, so metric structure as well as the vector structures. Okay. So this kind of I just remember a funny joke. During my masters, I asked one of my friends, so I want to learn Hindi, so I don't know Hindi. In my schools, I don't know like a Hindi language, so I want to learn Hindi. Then he told, if you want to learn Hindi, you just try to fall love with you try to fall love with a Hindi girl. If your children want to learn Hindi, then you find a Hindi girl, you can marry her so that your children also speaks Hindi. Because once you see now because in the nominal structures, so you have the both properties. So it the nominal structures now you can just think of this is one is a father and one is a mother. So the children can know now the better about like the father's their languages and their qualities, and similarly the mother's things. So the children now is they're expert in the both both languages. So similarly, so now non-linear structures, it just now speaks very well about continuous maps and linear maps. It just like a mixing together. Okay. Inner product space. So similarly, there's I hope you may be knowing this, but I'll just recall it. Inner product structure is nothing but for a given pair. So which is the the inner product of x comma x to be always positive, and if it is 0, if and only if x to be 0, and then the symmetry definition and this scalar multiple. So this is a yeah, and then like if you just take x plus y, and then it can be the linear. So I just forgot to write the one more line, but fine. So if you have an inner product on a vector space, taking, because now this number is a non-negative number, so you can take a square root and it's defined on a, so this defines a norm. So that means once if you have a norm, then that gives a metric. So this also once you have an inner product space, so that induces a norm linear space as well as metric space and all those things. Okay, so I hope all of you know what is called complete metric space. You may learn in the basic real analysis course. So complete space is nothing but if you have any Cauchy sequence, so the Cauchy sequence should converges in the same space. The element should be inside that. So if you have a norm linear space, in the case of norm linear space, you have the norm gives a metric, so you have a metric space, and that with that metric, if it's a complete metric space, we'll call them to be Banach spaces. And if suppose if the norm comes from an inner product, and then in the if that inner product space is a complete metric space, then we'll call them to be Hilbert space. Unbounded operator. Okay. So yeah, map between two norm linear spaces, it's called bounded operator if it's a linear as well as continuous. So because as a vector space structures, I want to be it should be a linear map. Since it has a metric structure, so I want them to be continuous map. So if you have both structures, then I'll call them to be bounded map. Or maybe ultimately just or equivalently you can just say that norm of tx is less than or equal to some constant mx for all x. So in fact, this is a equivalent in the case of metrics, and but this is not the for a metric space. So this is not the continuity definition. But in case of linear map, so this will be equivalent to saying that the continuous if and only if it has this property. But anyway, so that will just give for the moment. But for the you can just assume that a bound operator is nothing but a linear map as well as continuous map. So that's called the bounded operator. Okay. Yeah. So there's also the name why it's called bound operator. It takes a bounded set to bounded sets, so that's why it's also called bounded operator. Okay. So now examples of some inner product space Hilbert spaces. Take a CN or real line. So you can take a different inner product like this version, and then norm it gives norm is just already given by inner product of x comma x with the square root. So this is so this gives the inner product and norm for a CN. And also we know that CN is a separable space. So hence this is CN is a separable Hilbert space. Similarly, now take as a sequence space L2. Different instead of finite term, we define an infinite sum. So this gives an inner product as well as these terms gives a norm. So for a given element as a sequence, because element in the L2 is nothing but a complex sequence with the square sum terms. Okay. Now you restrict first n terms and then leave them to be all to be 0. That means like after some stage everything is 0. Then this is a part of C naught naught. But you know that like as n goes to infinity, then an is only this up to n terms. An plus 1, like you have up to n plus 1 terms. Like as n goes to infinity, so this converges to x. So that means that C naught naught is a dense set in L2. And note that where C naught naught is like is a kind of is a union of this kind of sets. But now this is a copy of kind of Cn. So it's a you know that the countable union of countable sets is countable. So hence, so the C naught will be again separable space. That means you can give a countable dense for it. And but this is again dense in L2. So L2 also okay. So L2 is an infinite dimensional separable Hilbert space. Yeah, and maybe once you learn functional analysis course, then you will come across with some special result which says that if we take a L2 is an infinite dimensional separable Hilbert space. Not only that, if we take any infinite dimensional separable Hilbert space, that will be nothing to be isometrically isomorphic to this space L2. Okay. So that's why, like, instead of just considering, like, in arbitrary several Hilbert space, just now you can just work with only L2 space. So that's a specialty of this sequence space. Yeah. So now I'll recall something from complex analysis. So do you have all the complex analysis course with you? Do you have learned complex analysis?
Yeah, it's in the third year course.
Okay. So, yeah. So let's take the definition of Mobius map. So Mobius maps are nothing but like they are also called bilinear transformations. So you have like two affine maps as a quotient of them. These all are complex numbers with the determinant AD minus BC to be non-zero number. If it is zero, then this map is reduced to be constant map. So that's why we are assuming to avoid to be a non-constant map, we are taking this to be non-zero number.
It would be better if you recall any major result if you use any. So recall the proof of any major result because there are some second year students in here.
Okay. Yeah. So now we want to define what's hyperbolic maps. For a fixed points, now take a t of z. So just we are solving for a fixed points. Once you solve for the fixed points, so you have a quadratic equations. So this quadratic equation just leaves to be. So you have like a. So yeah. So this is you can have at most, if you take any idea other than identity map. So it have at most two fixed points. But the automorphism of a unit disk. So the D denotes the unit disk and D closure is a closed unit disk. And the automorphism of a unit disk, that means it's a map from D to D, which is bijective, and F is holomorphic as well as the F inverse, so that is holomorphic. So that's a automorphism of a unit disk. So this is nothing but only this class of Mobius maps. But these are also automorphisms which takes a map F D to D. That means the unit disk is mapped to unit disk, and the circle maps to the circle, and the margin bigger than 1. That means the exterior of a disk. So that's maps to the exterior of disk. So in particular, so which maps the closed unit disk into closed unit disk. Yeah. And that's a simple fact. Like if you have any 0 to 1 and 0 to 1, like if you have a continuous function, then it has a fixed point. So maybe I think you might learn your basic course. You're just taking, like, you take f of x minus x and g of 0, you can just check that is positive, and g1 is g at 1 is negative. So by number theorem, there's a g of x to be 0. That means f as a fixed point. Okay. So similar result is also true for in the case of higher dimension. So maybe I'll just state as a result the Brouwer fixed point theorem, which says that if you have any continuous map from a closed disk to itself in a Euclidean space, so it has at least one fixed point. So in particular, if we take a automorphism which takes a closed unit ball to a closed unit ball in a dimension 2, so it should have a fixed point. And we know that the Mobius, but automorphism is nothing but a Mobius maps, so it can't have more than two fixed points. So it can have at most two fixed points, but fixed point is guaranteed by the Brouwer fixed point theorem. So we'll call them to be a hyperbolic automorphism. That means a map which takes a unit disk to unit disk, which is automorphism, is called a hyperbolic. If it has a two fixed points on the circle, but we have like a two fixed points. So note that, like, so you may say that, okay, this has always two fixed points, but this may not be so this number may not be in the unit disk itself. So this Mobius map is everywhere. So it's not only defined on a unit disk. So this is a defined on the whole complex plane. Okay, in fact, this is defined on the whole extended complex plane. So these two roots will be in the extended complex plane. They may not be in the closed unit disk. But suppose if you have the both fixed points, both fixed points to be on the not only closed unit disk, it should be on the only circle, like a mod z equal to 1. So in that case, we'll call them to be hyperbolic map.
No, but one second. If f is an automorphism of the disk, then both fixed points, if it exists, has to belong on the unit disk, right? I mean, it can be that there is exactly one fixed point, so the roots degenerate. So in that case, it's a parabolic.
So one second. So please repeat your question.
So I was asking that if f maps the unit disk to unit disk, as you said, it's an element of the automorphism group of D.
Yeah,
then both those roots has to then there are restrictions on the coefficients, right, on A, B, C, D. So both those roots have to belong to the unit disk, right? But it can be that both of them are the same. That's what, right?
Yeah. So
both of those roots can be the same if the discriminant vanishes, for example.
So yeah, but it may have suppose if you take a fixed points, some maybe one may be in the inside the unit disk, the other may be the outside the unit disk. So we can assume, like, we can swear that, like, both should be in the inside.
I see what you mean. Okay, but one of them has to belong to the unit disk, right? Both cannot be outside.
Yeah, so at least one fixed point should be inside the closed unit disk.
At least one belong.
Yeah, but
right,
not
those are the rotations.
Yeah, the rotations, exactly. So the rotations will take one to be 0 and the other to be infinity.
Right. Yes, I agree now.
Yeah, but in fact, like, so, but they also, for the other case, as you see, the parabolic or hyperbolic, so they have the fixed points on the circle, but not inside the disk. Yeah. Okay. So we wanted to be the both fixed points should be lie on the circle. Okay. So say, for example, if you take this map 2, 0, plus 1. So namely, this just like you can just normalize to know that this is of the form automorphism form. You can just check that +1 and -1, these both are so these both are fixed points of this map. So this is a hyperbolic automorphism. Okay. So now I'll just recall what's Hardy space. Now take up a power series with a square sum of coefficients. Okay. Note that if you have a function in Hardy space class, so this Hardy space, so the coefficients in L2, that means the coefficient is a square sum of sequences. So if it's a square sum of sequences, then of course, if it is a somehow like this is a convergent series, then the nth term should goes to 0. That means every convergent sequence is bounded. So hence the all an should be as a bounded sequences. So there's a bound for it. Now fix a complex number in the unit disk. Now by just f of z by the triangle inequality, you can just take that like summation mod a n a z power n, and then this mod a n is less than or equal to m. But now this is a geometric series which converges for all unit disk. Okay, so which says that this series is dominated by a convergent series for each point of unit disk. So that means this f of z, so this is a convergent series. So because like now we are just trying to find the radius of convergence for a given series. So for a given series, there is some positive radius with that the disk of radius some r in which the function is holomorphic, outside its diverges. So we are just trying to find that, at least in the case of when the z belongs to unit disk. So this is always convergence series convergence. So hence the radius of convergence is at least 1. So that means every Hardy space function is an analytic function on the unit disk. So note that, but we have some, like, each case we are not taking any sharp inequality. Just we are taking, this is convergence. The convergence just implies this, but it's not if and only if. Again, this is just we are taking the bounded series. So this is again, it's not if and only if. So we are just dominating by a bounded series, but now suppose this convergence implies this, okay, but whereas the converse, if this diverges, we cannot say anything about the convergence of this the lower sequence. So hence, like, we have, like, we have the both places, we have the only the crude estimate, so not the better estimates. So one may ask the question, okay, is it possible to have the instead of taking analytic radius 1, so can we have some like the bigger radius? So in fact, so that's not possible. So the D is a best domain. Yeah, so Hardy space is a set of all analytic function on the D. But not only that, so we cannot have a further domain. So say for example, if you take a summation z power n by n, so now the coefficient is 1 by n. So an is your 1 by n, and this, you know that this is a square sum sequences. Okay, but this will be like, if I find the radius of convergence by a root test or ratio test, you can just find that the radius is 1. Namely, this series is diverges at 1. So hence, so the radius of convergence, so D is a natural domain, so we cannot extend further.
I have a question.
Yes.
So can you, is it possible to have a function here which is, I mean, terrible, I mean, in the sense that, so for in this example, the disk of convergence is the unit disk, right? So that's the radius of convergence is 1, but you
yes,
can of course extend away from 1, right? You can extend analytically, continue away from 1, right? So it can have a bigger domain of definition.
No, what is you see?
But is it possible?
No, it's not possible. So that's why I told for this case. So this map, so it cannot be this function is not defined at 1, isn't it?
No, it is not defined at 1. I agree. But for example, let's take I. Of course, you can take a small ball around I and then take union of that small ball and the unit disk, right? So the domain of convergence can be bigger.
Oh,
disk,
okay.
It may not be a disk, right?
Okay. So anyway, so this is not for the. So now if for this function at least, so you want to say that this function is defined at I and you can extend further, but note that. So
yes.
But we note that if you just, instead of, we are not talking about a single element. If you take the whole class of all Hardy space functions. So for the whole whole class of Hardy space functions, I can't give a bigger domain than the unit disk. Suppose
I agree.
Yeah, because suitably you can just rotate it to get a some map which is does not define at I. So that's the.
So you can just. But I was asking if you can find a function on the Hardy space which cannot be analytically continued beyond the unit disk at all. Can you find that? So for example, one example of a function I know is of the form summation z to the n to the power n, but that's not in the Hardy space, right? That's functions.
Yeah, so those have a natural boundary to be unit disk. So but I think
not there such functions.
But that's not in a H2, but that's a certainly in HP space for p less than 1.
Yeah.
Okay. But maybe so. As you, for your questions, I don't have like immediate function which function like
okay.
For the natural domain to be unit disk, but I'll just think about it.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. Yes. So now we are just identifying the Hardy space with the L2 space, because like, you know, if you just think of the square sum sequences, and our Hardy space also like is a power series with the square sum terms. So we have the natural identification. So upon identifying the natural, so A0, A1, like, so you just send them to be as a power series form. So by this natural indication, so now L2 is in Hilbert space. So we can just imitate the same structures at Hardy space, H2 space, and we can make them to be like inner product and norm, and all those things can be defined here. So as in the case of L2, we are defining so the inner product as well as the norm. But now after defining this, now this Hardy space, this H2 becomes as Hilbert space, and H2 is an isometrically isomorphic L2. Okay. And also now any operator on L2 can be viewed as an operator in Hardy space. Now say for example, now you start with your L2 space, or L2 with this shift operator. So this operator, now the analog of this, so this element just shifting like a 0, A0, A1, A2 like this. So now this corresponding image now under the Hardy space class, so it will be thought of as this is a constant term, and this is a A0 z, A1 z square. So that means like if you just take z outside, then you have like again this function. So this is just your original function. So z into f of z. So that means, so the shift operator in L2 is nothing but just multiplying by z. So just as in the class of Hardy space, if you given a f, so the image will be nothing but multiplied by z. Like so this is also called known as the multiplication operator. So in general, I'll just define what is the proper definition of multiplication operator. So for a given holomorphic functions, in fact, not only holomorphic functions, you have to assume to be this to be a bounded holomorphic functions. Now define a map from H2 to H2, just defined by just f goes to psi times f. That means just you are multiplying these two functions. This is the product of if you just study any product of two Hardy space functions need not be in Hardy space. So that's why. But if you assume to be this to be a bounded function, then the product is makes sense. So that will be still in H2 space. So instead of taking any general holomorphic function, so this is a bound operator is which makes sense only if this to be our starting function should be a bounded analytic function. So now we'll define what's called composition operator. Okay. So take a holomorphic self map from now we are taking a self map. Okay. So once you have a holomorphic self map, and if you take a Hardy space or element, so that means f is a map from D to C. So f is a Hardy space class. So now after you can just compose them. Now you have the new function f composition phi. So now just take this element, this defined to be your operator. This C phi of f is defined to be f composition phi. One thing is just clear that these two are analytic functions, so composition is analytic. Okay, this is self map, but this is a square sum of functions. The f is in Hardy space, but this f composition phi whether it's in Hardy space or not. But answer is yes. That's also true. That's just done by Littlewood in 1925. So phi is an holomorphic self map. You take any holomorphic self map, then this C phi is a composition operator. So there's a bound operator in L2, namely the C phi of f. It's some constant time. So it depends on phi at 0 times f. So that means if f is in H2, that means this so this quantity finite. So that means the C phi of f is finite. That which is that. So this C phi of f is also in Hardy space. Okay. Inner function. Yeah, analytic function defined on unit disk. It's called an inner function. If the radial limit, because the function is defined on only unit disk, but now e power I theta is a point in the circle. So that e power I theta is not point of the domain. But now, so this means just we are taking the radial limit. So not the direct base function might not be defined here. So this radial limit is exist almost everywhere. So in the case of with the arc length measure, so if you don't know the what is called almost everywhere in the measure theory part, just forget about it. Instead of almost everywhere, you assume that this radial limit exists everywhere, and then the radial limit the also modulus to be 1. So you can assume that. But if you know measure theory, you can just for you just you can think of the radial limit in exist in almost everywhere sense, and similarly that will be as a, or you can say kind of it takes a maps a circle to circle. So that is a unit circle to unit circle. So kind of that. Yes, all the disk automation which does the property like which takes a unit circle into circle, but inner function but may not be different everywhere, but so it's kind of taking the unit circle to unit circle. Okay. Now there's a famous result on this line. If you take a now multiplication operator this mz and any invariant subspace other than 0, because 0 and whole H2 is always in a subspace. If you take other than 0, it should be of the form theta times H2, where theta is an inner function. That means like some multiple of H2 where is an inner function times. So these are the only invariant subspace of multiplication operator. So after this question now, so after this result, after Berling's result, so people started asking. So the invariant subspace problem, like it's apparently arises after this result. So what is the question? Just like take a Banach space over C and let T be a bound operator on it. So is there a proper non-trivial closed invariant subspace for a T? So that's the question. So subspace, okay, proper. So proper non-trivial, that means it should be it's not equal to that zero space, and it's not the whole space. Okay, because we know that this to be always a invariant subspace, so we avoid this two, and we want some proper space. But in fact, like since this is a Banach space, so that means we also have a metric space structure, so we expect them to be as a closed set. So as a subspace, it's a closed, like that means as a set is a closed set in the topology in the metric. But note that like there are no open subspace of Banach, like any nonlinear space. So the interior of a subspace is always empty. Maybe you can think of in a R2 in a plane, this is the dimension 2. But if you take a subspace, so either 0 or if you take any real line or any like a line passing through 0, so there's a one dimensional subspaces. If you take an interior point of that, it's nothing, like empty, because no. So that's why there are the subspace, it cannot be a open subspace. So that's why we are looking for the closed subspace. So openness cannot be done, like there are no open subspaces with respect to the given metric. Okay, yeah. So now the question is just, is there a proper non-trivial invariant subspace? That's also the closed subspace. Okay, but fundamental theorem of algebra, we already saw that, like for a finite dimensional case, so this is already done. By fundamental theorem of algebra, we have eigenvalues, so that means we have one dimensional invariant subspace. That's okay. But now for in general, if you take any non-zero element, and if you take its span and it's closer, now we are taking its closer. So if y is an invariant subspace, then its closer is also in invariant subspace. So that's why if the span closer is also in invariant subspace. But now this just is a span by countable elements, so you can take nicely the coefficients from rational numbers. We can just verify that this y is this span of this is separable, and its closure is also separable. So y is a separable space which also in invariant subspace. So we wanted them to be the proper subspace. So suppose if your x to be a non-separable case, so that suppose like if your x to be a non-separable case, so then the y will be obviously a proper non-trivial subspace for the non-trivial invariant subspace for T. So hence, so this question is have positive answer for in the case of in the case of finite dimensional case as well as in the non-separable cases. So now the question is just now for reduce now the remaining cases for medium cases. That means like if you have only separable Banach space, whether it has a invariant subspace or not, like the proper non-trivial invariant subspace. Answer is no. So no, the famous person Ferenc Flow, so he's known as famous for finding mistakes. Like he always, whenever people believe that okay, this something may be true, but he always just comes in between and he told okay, this is not true. So he'll give some counter examples like that. So yeah, so he gave in 87. So he gave in his paper. So he gave a Banach space, which is a separate Banach space, on which the zero and the whole space. So these are the only invariant subspace. So there are no other proper non-trivial invariant subspaces. Yeah, in fact, his result he announced at 1976, the annual meeting of American Mathematical Society at Toronto. But no, it's published. But after, but no, it's a very long paper. It's a no 213 to 300, it's like around 100 pages. So more than 100 pages. So it's take a long time to review on. He's not written properly. So it takes more than 10 years to review that, and it's finally it's published in 87. You see, he announced at 76, but now it's published in 87. Okay. So in the case of Banach spaces, okay, so that's now Banach spaces. Now the answer is no. Then now next people start asking if instead of now take a Banach space, now take a Hilbert space. So if that means the space, the norm is given by an inner product. So and take any boundary linear operator on that. So again, will you get does T as an invariant subspace? So answer is still open. So answer is not known yet. So if you like if you are able to find a counter example, that means you have there's an infinite dimensional separable Hilbert space with the operator T. Assume that with does not have an non-trivial subspace. Or also if you have some positive answer, that means like for a given any operator, we can always have some non-trivial invariant subspace. So any answer, because still now we don't know about the answer. So any answer, if you have like if you solve this question, then you'll be in a very famous mathematicians in a future, like in a not future, like once you have answered, then answer for this question, then you'll be a celebrated mathematician. And okay, I'll just say some equivalent conjecture in that line in terms of composition operator. So every boundary linear operator on any infinite dimensional separable Hilbert space as in the closed proper non-trivial invariant subspace. That means the answer is yes, if and only if every non-trivial minimal invariant subspace of C5 as dimension 1, where phi is in any hyperbolic automorphism. That means instead of taking any bounded operator on any Hilbert space, now you fix your Hilbert space to be a Hardy space, and instead of taking any operator, you fix your map to be composition operator, namely where phi is an hyperbolic automorphism. I'll recall what is hyperbolic automorphism: the map which has two fixed points on the circle. So the your automorphism which has two fixed points is called hyperbolic automorphism. Say for example, you can take this map or any other map. This doesn't matter. You can choose any hyperbolic automorphisms. Now you take a C5. This is a single map on Hardy space. Like so, in Hardy space under this operator, if you take every minimal invariant subspace to be non-trivial, that means other than 0. So that there should be dimension 1. So if you have this result, that is just same as saying instead if you take any operator on any space, so that have a proper invariant closed subspace. So that is the equivalent conjecture. So that's this motivates the people to work on finding more work on the composition of operators, because now it's kind of like trying to give instead of thinking about any general operator, you can now think of one single space and one single operator. For this operator, if you know its minimal invariant subspace are like one dimensional spaces, then done. So people are still working towards it. So recently maybe this 2021, so I think me and with Jaydev Sarkar, so we have a paper on finding the invariant subspaces of composition operators, but of course this is just beginning, but we don't have answer for this question yet. Okay, so I'll just conclude. So this invariant subspaces problem is it started due to the all finding the all invariant subspace of multiplication operators on Hardy space. So B.S. Berling he did at 1949. So he gave all invariant subspace of multiplication operators in terms of inner functions. So after seeing this result, so in the general question for a given operator, is there any non-trivial invariant subspace? So the question started. So question started by a special operator on Hardy space. Now also people believe that, so if you have answer for this composition operator question, so it may also end by a composition operator on Hardy space. So that means you have a famous operator on Hardy space which started this question, and again the another famous operator, composition operators. So it may conclude this question by as a positive or negative in soon. So we'll expect further base. Okay, so I'll stop here. If you have any comments or questions, you can ask.
So I have a question.
Yes.
A couple actually. So one is so for if you have a Hilbert space and you have a self-adjoint operator on a Hilbert space, then what's the solution? You have some spectral resolutions are invariant subspaces, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Great. Okay. Great. Okay. Great. And okay, and but if you have an operator general operator between Hilbert spaces, then you could factorize it, right? You could factorize it as I mean, self-adjoint operator times projection. But the point is, you have no control on the projection, or what?
But yeah, I don't know, like still now this question is not solved.
Yeah, of course I know that. I'm just
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and also the main thing is just this class of composition operator is does not fall into the any category. So this not so we the class of operators. So this not normal, like normal self-adjoint.
Right, exactly. These are
does not fall into any category. So that's why so this and people now thinking of this composition operators tools.
Okay. And also one question about the Littlewood's theorem that you mentioned. So that seems like a corollary of Schwarz-Alford's, right? Because you have
so bounded operator. Okay.
Yeah.
So the statement.
Yes.
Yeah.
This yeah. See. Yeah. So this seems like a corollary of Schwarz. I mean, I'm not sure because. I mean, so if you take this, you are taking L2 norm here on both sides. But if you so
yes.
if point wise it's true that if you have f phi x, then that's less or equal to this expression where phi instead of phi 0 you have phi x, right? That's Schwarz-Alford, right? Because that's the
So this result is done at 1925. So
okay.
So what about the alphas? Like when you told like is that like earlier than this?
Though I don't know. Okay, that's a good question. I don't know.
So this is done at 1925.
Yeah.
So,
okay. I see. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I also just you can look like at this some history about this problem. So I'll just also share this. Or you can also get from the internet by OBS. Though. Yeah. So close this. So okay, we'll stop now.
Okay, looks like there are more other questions. So yeah, thank you sir for the talk. We'll meet next week then.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll stop there.